My name is Patricia Lowe. I am 66 years old. I spent 40 years teaching other people's children how to believe in themselves. And for the last 10 years, I worked quietly as a consulting strategist for an education tech firm. My monthly salary was $30,000. But I never told my son. He always saw me living simply. The same small house with the squeaky porch, the same old car that coughed every winter, the same canvas tote bag with faded ink from decades of carrying lesson plans. He believed I was poor. Everyone did. And I let them believe it. There is a strange kind of freedom in being underestimated. Tonight, I am standing in the lobby of the most expensive restaurant in the city. Golden light pours from crystal chandeliers and hits the marble floor like warm honey. Every surface shines. People turn their heads. Every woman looks like they were born into wealth. I look like I got lost. I stare at my reflection in a wall of mirrored glass. The lighting makes my hair look even more silver than usual. My dress is a soft gray one I have worn for more than 20 years. The hem is slightly frayed. I do not hide it. I chose it on purpose. Because tonight I'm pretending to be exactly what everyone already assumes, a poor and naive mother. I never told my son about my $30,000 salary. He always saw me living simply. He invited me to dinner with his wife's parents. I wanted to see how they treat a poor person. So I came here acting like a ruined and naive mother. But the moment I walked through the door, the air changed. There they are. My son, Daniel, standing beside his wife, Olivia. Across from them, her parents sit at the table like royalty. Claudia and Richard Avery. Their last name alone opens doors in this city. Claudia sees me first. Her eyes travel from my shoes to my hair. Slow, unhurried, like she is scanning a stain on a white carpet. Richard does not even stand to greet me. He glances at me and then looks away, bored. Daniel freezes. His shoulders stiffen. He swallows hard. He did not expect me to show up looking like this. The waiter opens the door wider for me. The room smells like expensive wine and polished ego. I force a gentle smile and take a single step inside. In that instant, Claudia leans toward Daniel and whispers, I do not hear the full sentence, but I hear enough. She looks simple. Inside my chest, something shifts. Something cold, sharp, voice over, calm and steady. I never knew a single sentence could make a heart feel so heavy. Claudia stands finally. She extends her hand like she is giving me permission to enter her world. Patricia, how nice to finally meet you. Daniel did not tell us much about your background. Her voice is wrapped in silk but lined with steel. I shake her hand. My palm is steady. My breathing is calm. No one here knows the truth. No one knows that while they judge me based on my shoes, I am the woman who signs quarterly contracts worth 6 figures. I am the one who funds scholarships for students whose parents have given up on them. I am the one who can buy every bottle of wine displayed in their glass tower without blinking. But I say nothing. There is power in silence. Daniel steps toward me, placing a hand on my elbow. Mom, you made it. His voice is low, strained, like he is hoping I do not embarrass him. I whisper back, of course, it is an important night. He forces a smile and leads me to the table. As I sit down, Claudia waves the waiter over. We will look at the wine list again, something refined. She does not look at me when she says it. She's busy tightening her napkin like a battle strategist preparing her first strike. The waiter hands me a menu. It is thick, heavy, the kind that lists no prices because prices do not matter to people who belong here. Claudia leans toward me with a bright, rehearsed smile. Patricia, dear, I can recommend something affordable for you. The menu can be surprising. She says it is affordable like it is a gift. Olivia shifts in her chair. Her eyes flick to mine. There is an apology in them, but her lips stay closed. She will not risk going against her mother. I nod slowly. I lift the menu even though I already know what I will do. My voice is warm, soft, steady. Thank you, Claudia. I appreciate your concern. Inside my mind, an echo. People show who they are when they think you have nothing to offer. I do not react. I do not defend myself. I simply breathe. Richard finally speaks. So, Patricia, Daniel tells us you are retired, living on a teacher's pension. That must be tough. Very admirable to live that way. His tone implies something else, a quiet condemnation. Poor people are admirable. From a safe distance. I fold my napkin across my lap. The fabric is crisp. My voice remains gentle. I am doing fine. I have everything I need. Claudia tilts her head. Do you think so? Not a question, a statement. The room seems to fade. The lights blur. Even the sound of forks on porcelain disappears. For a moment, I'm no longer 66, I am 27 again, standing in a grocery store late at night, counting coins for baby formula. My husband was in the hospital. Daniel was a toddler. I remember being treated exactly the same way, like I was less. Back in the present, Olivia fidgets with her napkin. Daniel stares at the table. No one defends me. Silence stretches across the table like a sheet of ice. I take a slow breath, voice over. I used to think that silence was a weakness. Tonight, I realized it was a strategy. The waiter returns to take our orders. Claudia puts a hand on his arm. She will have the chicken. It is inexpensive. I lift my eyes to hers. I do not let my voice tremble. With respect, I can order for myself. Claudia blinks, not used to resistance. I smile at the waiter. I would like the chef special, whatever he recommends. The waiter nods with a slight smile, a reflection of dignity. A small crack appears in Claudia's mask. The scene slows. The camera focuses on my hands resting on the table. The bony knuckles, the thin veins, the age, but also the steadiness. Voice over. I am not here to fight. I am not here to prove anything. I am here to observe. Because the most dangerous truth in the world is this. If someone believes you are beneath them, you never need to argue. You only need to let them talk. Freeze frame. 3 days earlier, Daniel called me. Fade to black. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon while I was finishing a report for a school district. The document was dense with numbers, but I enjoyed the precision. Data never judged anyone. Data did not look at the cost of your shoes. My phone buzzed twice before I noticed the name. Daniel. My son. I smiled automatically, the kind of smile that lives in muscle memory. When I answered, his tone was softer than usual, almost careful. Hi, Mom. How are you? I could tell something sat behind the small talk. He never called in the middle of the day. I'm fine, sweetheart, working from home. Why? I heard a breath, then the sound of him moving, maybe pacing. So, Olivia's parents want to have dinner this weekend. They'd really like to meet you. The pause after that line was too long to be normal. That sounds nice, I said. Where? At La Belle Maison, downtown. I knew that restaurant. It was the kind that had its own valet and never printed prices. That's quite fancy, I said. Yeah, he answered quickly. They just, like that place. He hesitated again, and then came the sentence that would sit inside my chest like a splinter. Just dress simple, Mom. They're different. I repeated it in my head as he said it. Different. Different how? I asked quietly. He tried to laugh. They're more formal, just please, nothing too bright or, casual. The laugh died quickly, replaced by silence. I let it hang for a second before saying, You don't have to worry, Daniel. I know how to behave. I know you do, Mom. His voice drifted. I just don't want them to misinterpret anything. Interpret what? I asked, though I already knew. He changed the subject. Anyway, it's Saturday at 7. I'll pick you up if you want. I smiled, even though he couldn't see it. That won't be necessary. I can get there myself. He sounded relieved. Okay, great, thanks, Mom. The line clicked, leaving only the faint hum of my refrigerator. I sat there, phone still in hand, staring at the half-finished report glowing on my laptop screen. The words blurred together. The room felt suddenly smaller. I looked around my kitchen, the same cracked tiles, the same faded curtains I had sewn myself when Daniel was 10. On the table, my tea had gone cold. I lifted the cup anyway. The bitterness had settled at the bottom. I thought of his words again. "Just dress simple, Mom. They're different." It was not cruelty, it was fear. The kind of fear that made people edit their own families to fit another person's expectations. I placed the cup down slowly. The sound of porcelain against wood was sharper than it should have been. My heart didn't break. It adjusted, the way old wood bends but does not splinter. I took a breath and looked at the small shelf above the stove. There, behind an old recipe book, sat a silver fountain pen, the one my husband gave me the day I got the call from the company offering me a consulting position after retirement. He had been so proud. "Now they'll finally pay you what you're worth," he'd said. The pen was heavy, smooth, engraved with my initials. I reached for it, feeling the weight in my palm. It reminded me of him, of years when I believed being good and humble was enough. I turned the pen over in my fingers. It still wrote perfectly. I had used it to sign dozens of contracts, to approve budgets larger than Daniel's entire yearly salary, yet he still saw me as the fragile teacher who needed his guidance about table manners. I smiled at the irony. The sun was setting outside, washing the kitchen in soft gold. I thought about the first time Daniel brought Olivia home. She had been polite, almost sweet, but she looked around the house like someone touring a museum of modest living. When I offered her tea, she said, "I'm fine," and scrolled through her phone. I told myself she was just shy. People often are when they do not know where to place kindness. But this phone call changed something. It was not just her judgment. It was my son's quiet agreement with it. He had absorbed her world and forgotten mine. Forgotten that I once worked double shifts, wrote grant proposals until midnight, and sold my wedding ring to pay his college application fees. Forgotten that simplicity was not poverty, it was choice. I walked to the sink and rinsed my cup. The water was warm, the steam fogging the small window above it. My reflection looked tired, but there was strength behind the lines. I thought of how easily people confuse silence for weakness. That night, I decided silence could also be a strategy. If Daniel wanted me to dress simple, I would. If he wanted me to seem small, I could do that too. I had spent my entire life shrinking myself so others could feel taller. The difference now was that I knew how to use it. I placed the pen back on the shelf beside a small photo of my husband in his favorite corduroy jacket. He was smiling, eyes soft, as if reminding me that patience was power. "You always knew when to wait," I whispered. I picked up my phone again and scrolled through the restaurant's website. White linen tables, waiters in black suits, prices hidden behind phrases like seasonal selection, a place designed to test who belongs. I smiled. I had dined with ministers and board directors who used the same kind of performance. I had survived them all by being exactly what they didn't expect: quiet, observant, and deliberate. That night, I took out my wardrobe from the narrow closet. The air smelled faintly of lavender sachets I had tucked between the hangers. I passed my hand along the dresses: navy, cream, floral, black. My fingers stopped at the gray one, the old dress I had worn to Daniel's high school graduation. It was soft now, nearly weightless, the fabric thinning with time. I held it up to the light. It looked honest. That was what I needed. I placed it on the chair and then folded a small scarf over it. Pale blue, the same color as the morning sky the day my husband died. I kept the scarf because grief softens into memory when it is touched by something tangible. It would be for dinner. The next morning, I called my friend Helen. She had been my colleague for years before I retired. She was the kind of woman who read people in a heartbeat. "He called?" she asked before I even told her. "He did. And let me guess. Fancy restaurant, fancy parents. You know me too well." "What are you going to do?" she asked. "I'm going to let them think what they want," I said. Helen was quiet for a second. "That's dangerous, Pat." "No," I said softly. "It's revealing." After we hung up, I went for a walk. The park was nearly empty, the trees bare from winter. Every sound echoed: my footsteps on the pavement, the flutter of birds, the distant hum of traffic. I found a bench near the frozen pond and sat. I thought about Daniel as a boy, the way he used to run to me after school, showing me drawings of rockets and houses. He used to say, "When I grow up, I'll buy you a big house so you never have to work again." And now he believed that small meant shame. I wondered when that shift happened. Maybe when he saw how easily the world rewarded arrogance over decency. Maybe when he realized humility does not trend well. I sat there until the sun slipped low, the air biting my cheeks. When I stood to leave, I felt lighter. The decision had already formed in me like a quiet current. I would go to that dinner. I would play the role they expected, but I would not be diminished by it. I would let them speak until the truth spoke for itself. As I walked home, the city lights flickered one by one. I imagined Daniel rehearsing what he would say to his in-laws about me, carefully editing the rough edges of his past. I did not blame him. I had taught him to adapt. I just never meant for him to erase. When I reached my doorstep, I paused, feeling the worn wood beneath my fingers. Inside, the house smelled faintly of cinnamon and old paper. I went straight to the shelf again, picked up the silver pen, and placed it in my purse. Not as decoration, as a reminder. The pen had written my freedom once. It could hold it again. Voice over. That was the moment I knew. My son did not really know who I was, but soon he would. Saturday arrived with the kind of gray light that makes everything look honest. I woke early, though I had hardly slept. The air in my small bedroom was still and cool. I opened the curtains and watched the neighborhood stir. An old man walked his dog. A paper boy tossed the morning news onto the sidewalk. Ordinary life. Peaceful. I made coffee, the same way I had for decades. 2 spoons of sugar, 1 of patience. The sound of the kettle filled the silence like company. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the chair across from me, the one my husband used to sit in. For a moment, I imagined his voice saying what he always said before a hard day. "Be exactly who you are, Pat. That's more than enough." I smiled at the memory and whispered, "Not tonight, love. Tonight I'll be what they want to see." After breakfast, I opened the closet. My clothes hung in quiet rows, most of them the same shades of blue, gray, or cream. I passed my hand over each hanger until I reached the old gray dress. The fabric was soft from age, the color faded at the seams. It still smelled faintly of lavender. I held it up against the window. The morning light slipped through it, thin as breath. It was perfect. It told a story without speaking. I laid it on the bed, smoothing the wrinkles with my palms. Next came the shoes, black flats scuffed at the toes but comfortable. I wiped them with a damp cloth and smiled. People like Claudia notice small things. The wrong kind of shine might give me away. My hair, now silver, I tied back in a neat bun. Simple. Controlled. As I prepared, I thought about how appearances shape truth in other people's minds. When I was still working at the firm, I had seen men in designer suits speak nonsense and still be applauded, while women with real ideas were dismissed because their voices trembled. I learned that the world listens to tone before it listens to content. That day, I would let them hear their own tone clearly. I looked at the clock. It was only 10 in the morning, but my heart was already beating with quiet purpose. I turned on the small radio in the kitchen. A familiar jazz melody filled the air. It reminded me of my old office. My mind drifted back to that day 5 years earlier, the day everything changed. In the flashback, I was standing in a glass-walled conference room, the city skyline behind me. I had just presented a district funding strategy that would save hundreds of teachers' jobs. The younger executives clapped. My assistant, a 25-year-old named Jeremy, whispered, "You're a legend, Mrs. Lowe. Nobody negotiates like you." I laughed, telling him legends are just people who refuse to be ignored. The CEO, a tall man with a polished smile, shook my hand. "You just secured $12 million in grants. That's the kind of brilliance money can't buy." I remember thinking then how strange it felt, to finally be valued after years of invisibility. The sound of a car horn outside pulled me back to the present. My small kitchen replaced the skyscraper view. I poured myself another cup of coffee and looked at the framed photo on the counter. Daniel as a child, holding a drawing of our old house. His smile was missing a tooth. I touched the glass gently. "You used to be proud of simple things," I whispered. "When did that change?" Helen called around noon. Her voice was as direct as always. "Pat, I've been thinking about tonight. Are you sure you want to go through with this act of poverty?" I laughed softly. "It's not an act, Helen. It's a lesson." "You could just tell them the truth," she insisted. "You could walk in there and let them choke on your success." "And what would that prove?" I asked. "That I can play their game better than they can? No, I don't want to compete with them. I want to understand them." Helen exhaled on the other end of the line. "You've always been too calm for your own good." "Maybe," I said, "but calmness is how you hear what others are too loud to notice." After the call, I walked into the living room and opened the drawer where I kept my husband's watch and the silver pen. The pen gleamed under the afternoon light, engraved with my initials, PL. I remembered the day he gave it to me, his fingers trembling slightly as he said, "Use this to sign things that matter." I had signed contracts, letters of recommendation, even scholarship approvals with it. Tonight, it would stay in my purse, a quiet reminder that my worth could never be measured in fabric or jewelry. I packed the purse carefully, wallet, pen, tissue, one tube of lipstick. I glanced at the mirror by the door. The woman staring back at me looked composed, perhaps even humble. But her eyes carried stories no one at that table could guess. I thought about Daniel again, his nervous voice on the phone, his attempt to blend two worlds. He wanted to protect his image, not his mother. The thought stung, but beneath the sting was clarity. I once told my students that silence is a kind of language. It says, "I am still here. I am thinking. I am not yours to define." Tonight, that language would speak louder than money ever could. I took a small notepad from the counter and wrote a single sentence. "You learn who people are by who they think you are." Then I slipped the note into my purse beside the pen. A message to myself, maybe, or a prophecy. The afternoon passed in a rhythm of small tasks, ironing the dress, polishing the shoes again, arranging my hair. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying the scent of rain. I watched the sky darken, feeling that strange mixture of dread and anticipation that comes before a truth reveals itself. I imagined Claudia and Richard preparing too, choosing clothes that whispered privilege, selecting the right wine to prove taste. I wondered if they ever asked themselves why they needed to prove anything at all assent. The clock struck 6. I slipped into the dress. The fabric cooled against my skin. I added a pearl pin at the collar, the only piece of jewelry I owned that had no price tag, only sentiment. I stood before the mirror once more. For a fleeting second, I saw my mother's reflection overlaying mine. She had worked as a seamstress all her life, never owning much, but always holding her head high. She used to say, "When you have dignity, you can wear anything and still look like yourself." I smiled. "You were right, Mom." The sound of rain began to patter against the window. I reached for my coat, slipped on the worn shoes, and picked up my umbrella. The silver pen rested quietly in my purse, a heartbeat of its own. I turned off the lights, locking the door behind me. The hallway smelled faintly of old paint and dust, the kind of scent that lingers in buildings that have seen more stories than they can hold. As I stepped outside, the first drops of rain kissed my face. The air was cool, cleansing. I walked slowly toward the bus stop at the end of the street. I could have called a car service, but I wanted the walk. It grounded me, reminded me where I came from. On the way, I thought of the moral question forming inside me like a quiet ache. If your own child feels ashamed of you, should you protect them from the truth, or should you let them face it? I did not have the answer yet, but I knew that by tonight I would. Voice over. I used to teach children that silence was a language. Tonight I will teach adults the same lesson. The rain had stopped by the time I called the taxi. The street glistened like a sheet of dark glass, every light reflecting twice. I watched from the window as the car pulled up, headlights cutting through the mist. The driver, an older man with kind eyes, opened the door for me. "Evening, ma'am? Headed somewhere special?" I smiled faintly. Something like that. The ride was quiet except for the rhythmic sound of the wipers. The city outside looked distant, almost theatrical. Each passing street lamp painted brief streaks of gold across the window. I stared at my reflection, the gray dress, the bun of silver hair, the calm face that betrayed nothing. My purse sat on my lap, my fingers resting over the silver pen inside. It pulsed with memory as if reminding me to stay steady. When the taxi turned onto Broad Street, I could already see the restaurant glowing at the corner like a chandelier trapped inside a building. La Belle Maison, the kind of place where even the air seemed priced. A valet in a black coat rushed forward with a practiced smile. I handed him the fare and stepped out. The pavement gleamed with puddles that mirrored the light from inside. For a brief moment, I stood there, looking at the entrance. Tall glass doors, golden handles, and through them, the blur of elegant people moving in slow rhythm. I took a breath. My heels clicked softly as I walked forward. The sound, swallowed by the carpet as soon as I crossed the threshold. The hostess smiled. "Good evening, ma'am. Do you have a reservation?" "Yes, Avery party. I'm Patricia Lowe." Her eyes scanned the list. "Ah, yes. They're already here. This way, please." The air inside carried a fragrance of truffle and wine. My heart thudded once, calm but deliberate. As we weaved through the tables, I saw them before they saw me. Daniel, straight-backed but visibly tense. Olivia beside him, fingers tracing the rim of her glass, and across the table, Claudia and Richard Avery, perfectly composed, the kind of couple who lived as if under constant observation. Daniel looked up first. Relief flashed in his eyes, quickly followed by something else. Embarrassment. He stood too quickly. "Mom, you made it." His tone tried to sound warm, but landed somewhere uncertain. Olivia rose next, smiling politely. "Mrs. Lowe, so good to see you." Her voice was soft but distant, as if she were addressing a guest, not family. Then Claudia turned. Her gaze traveled from my shoes to my face with the kind of precision one reserves for antiques. Careful, assessing, detached. A pause. Then a smile, polite and practiced. "How lovely," she said. "You remind me of my old nanny." The words hung between us like perfume, sweet at first, then sour. My lips curved into the smallest of smiles. Voiceover. Sometimes an insult does not live in the words themselves, but in the tone that delivers them. Daniel shifted, clearing his throat. "Mom, this is Olivia's mother, Claudia, and her father, Richard." He gestured awkwardly. "This is my mom, Patricia." Richard gave a curt nod. "Pleasure." He didn't stand. His cufflinks caught the light. Everything about him said efficiency, control, hierarchy. I nodded back, calm. "Likewise." The hostess pulled out a chair for me. I thanked her and sat, placing my purse gently beside me. The tablecloth was white linen. The silverware gleamed like small weapons. Claudia leaned forward, her elbows barely touching the edge of the table. "Daniel's told us so much about you," she said. "You must be proud of him." "I am," I replied simply. "He's worked hard." She smiled, tilting her head. "Yes, he has. He's always been very ambitious. Olivia says he gets that from you." Her tone was sugar, but the aftertaste was vinegar. Daniel chuckled nervously. "Mom always worked a lot. She's retired now." Claudia clasped her hands. "A teacher, wasn't it?" "Yes," I said. "How noble," she murmured, her smile tightening. "Not many people stay in that line of work these days. So selfless." Her husband spoke for the first time. "It must be hard living on a teacher's pension. The system isn't exactly generous." I turned my gaze to him. "It's enough," I said. He nodded, uninterested, already glancing at the wine list. Olivia tried to bridge the silence. "Mom, Dad, they have that Pinot you like." Claudia waved a hand. "Order for the table, dear." I folded my napkin over my lap, fingers steady. I could feel their glances flickering toward me, small but constant, like insects drawn to light. They wanted to see what kind of simple woman Daniel came from. I let them look. The waiter arrived with menus. Claudia didn't glance at hers. "We'll start with oysters and the house salad." Patricia, dear, you might enjoy the chicken entree. It's light and affordable. Daniel's eyes widened slightly. Mom can order whatever she likes. Oh, of course, Claudia said, smiling too broadly. I just thought she might appreciate a little help navigating the menu. Some of the prices here can surprise people. Her laughter tinkled like ice cubes in a glass. I kept my voice soft. Thank you, Claudia. I'm sure I'll manage. Olivia looked down, stirring her water. A flush crept across her cheeks. She could sense the cruelty, but her silence was loyalty. I understood. I had once been a daughter-in-law, too. Daniel shifted again, wiping his palms on his napkin. So, how was your week, Mom? I smiled at him, grateful for the effort. Productive. Claudia raised a brow. Oh, what do you do to keep busy? I write, I said. Old habits die hard. How charming, she replied before turning to Olivia. Isn't that lovely? Your husband's mother has a hobby. Another smile. Another cut. The waiter returned to take the wine order. Richard selected the most expensive bottle on the list, as if it were muscle memory. When the waiter poured, Claudia lifted her glass delicately. To my family, she said. New beginnings and shared standards. Her eyes flicked toward me as she said the last words. I raised my glass anyway. To be kind, I said. The smallest ripple crossed her expression. Dinner began. Conversation moved around me like a current, about investments, travel, the renovation of their summer home. No one asked where I lived. No one asked what I dreamed. That was fine. I had not come to be known. I had come to see. Daniel glanced at me once during the meal. His eyes carried an apology. I gave him a reassuring nod. This was his test, not mine. The waiter passed by, refilling glasses. Claudia leaned back, smiling like a queen surveying her court. I sat quietly, my hands folded in my lap, the gray fabric of my dress blending into the linen around me. I thought again of my husband's words. Be exactly who you are. Tonight that meant being invisible long enough to see the truth glow in plain sight. The light flickered across the table, soft and golden, but in my chest, something colder settled. The waiter returned with the menus folded neatly like invitations to judgment. Claudia placed hers down without opening it. Patricia, dear, may I help you choose? The portions here can be deceiving. You might prefer something light. Her tone was syrupy, sweet enough to sting. I smiled gently. Thank you, Claudia. I'm sure whatever I order will be fine. She turned to the waiter, dismissing my words as if they were background noise. She'll have the roasted chicken. It's the simplest thing on the menu. The waiter hesitated, glancing at me. I nodded politely. That will be fine. Richard cleared his throat, already moving on. So Daniel, about the investment we talked about, have you looked into municipal bonds? Tax advantages are excellent this quarter. Daniel straightened in his chair. Yes, sir. I've been researching it. Maybe next month, once our budget settles. Richard nodded. Good. You have to think long term. Olivia's uncle just closed on another property in Aspen. Timing is everything. No one looked at me. The conversation circled the table like a current I wasn't meant to enter. I folded my napkin and listened. Claudia spoke about a charity gala, a boutique renovation, the headaches of managing house staff. Olivia nodded in rhythm, though her eyes occasionally flicked toward me, small apologetic glances that vanished as quickly as they appeared. She looked like a woman who had made peace with her silence. I watched Daniel laugh too loudly at Richard's jokes. I had never seen my son try this hard to belong. His smile was careful, his posture rehearsed, a stranger wearing my child's face. The waiter returned with wine. Richard swirled his glass with authority, explaining the vintage. Claudia lifted hers delicately. To progress, she said, and to families who strive to elevate themselves. The word elevate floated in the air like perfume, heavy and expensive. I raised my glass. To be honest, I said softly. Richard didn't seem to hear. He launched into a story about a recent trip to Europe, about private tours and vineyard owners who recognized his name. Claudia chimed in with laughter that sounded rehearsed. Daniel smiled but said nothing. I could feel him avoiding my eyes. The food arrived. The chicken was simple, tender, and perfectly seasoned. Claudia's plate was far grander, artfully arranged seafood over gold leaf. She took one delicate bite, then turned toward me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "This place never disappoints. I'm glad you're getting to experience it, Patricia. Daniel tells us you don't go out much." "I enjoy quiet places," I said. "I imagine so," she replied. "After all, teaching can't have been very lucrative. Still, there's dignity and modesty." Olivia's fork paused mid-air. Daniel's face flushed. He muttered, "Mom's always been careful with money." Claudia nodded approvingly. "And that's admirable. Every family needs someone grounded. You must be proud of Daniel. He married up." The table fell silent. Even the clinking of silverware seemed to stop. Claudia took a slow sip of wine, pretending not to notice the tension she had created. I felt the familiar tightening in my throat, the one that used to come when a student insulted me under their breath, or when a parent assumed a teacher's time had no value. I looked at her, calm. My voice stayed level. "I am proud of him," I said. "He's always been kind. That's worth more than anything you can buy." Her smile faltered, only for a moment. "Of course," she said quickly. "Kindness is lovely." Richard jumped in to change the subject. "Daniel, tell me, how are you finding your new position? I heard promotions are quite competitive at your firm." Daniel nodded eagerly. "Yes, sir, I'm learning a lot." The conversation drifted back to investments, travel, and the value of social networks. I sat quietly, eating my meal, each bite small and deliberate. I had faced far worse than arrogance. But something about watching my son shrink to fit their approval cut deeper than any insult could. Olivia caught my eye again, her lips pressed into a thin line, her gaze heavy with apology. In that moment, she was not my rival, but a mirror, showing me what quiet shame looked like from the other side of privilege. I thought of all the women I had taught over the years, all the girls who believed they needed to be smaller to be loved. I recognized that same lesson unfolding now, in my own family. Richard leaned back, satisfied with his meal. "We're fortunate, really," he said. "Some people never learn to play the game. The world rewards presentation, always has." Claudia nodded, turning to me again. "That's why I tell Olivia appearances matter. People judge quickly. It's not fair, but it's the way things are." I smiled faintly. "Yes, but sometimes appearances are the only lie people know how to live with." Her eyebrows arched. She didn't understand it, not fully, but Olivia did. Her eyes widened, and for the first time she smiled. Small, hesitant, but real. The plates were cleared. Dessert menus arrived. Claudia ordered without asking anyone else. "The chocolate soufflé here is divine. Patricia, perhaps a coffee? It's lighter." Daniel looked mortified. "Mom loves dessert," he said quickly. I shook my head gently. "Coffee will be perfect." Inside, I felt a quiet shift. I had entered this dinner as a guest expected to endure humiliation. Instead, I was beginning to see the cracks forming in their control. Every insult sharpened my clarity. Every pause gave me power. The waiter refilled our glasses. The conversation continued, full of polite emptiness. Richard spoke about real estate. Claudia boasted about Olivia's social calendar. Daniel nodded at all the right times. When the check arrived, Richard reached for it automatically. "Allow me," he said, the words practiced, habitual. I opened my purse and set a card on the table before he could finish. "Oh no," Claudia said, laughing lightly. "That's unnecessary." "Of course," I replied. "I insist, it's only dinner." The waiter took the card without hesitation. He returned moments later with a slip for me to sign. I uncapped my pen, the silver one. For a brief second, its reflection caught the chandelier's light. Claudia's eyes narrowed, curious, but I smiled and handed the signed receipt back to the waiter. No one spoke. I reached for my bag, stood slowly, and thanked them for the evening. My voice was calm, my posture straight. The night was still young, but the lesson had already begun. The air at the table felt heavier after dessert, like perfume that had stayed too long. The waiter cleared the plates, leaving behind the faint scent of chocolate and coffee. The others leaned back in their chairs, satisfied, while I sipped my drink slowly, letting the warmth coat my throat. For a moment, I thought the night might end quietly, but then Claudia set down her glass and folded her hands with deliberate grace. I had seen that posture before, at meetings where people offered deals that sounded kind but came with invisible chains. She smiled. "Patricia, may I say something personal?" I nodded. "Of course." Her fingers brushed the rim of her glass, tracing it as if rehearsing her next words. "You've raised a wonderful son. Daniel is truly exceptional. Olivia and we are very lucky to have him in our family." Daniel looked down, shoulders tight. Compliments from Claudia always carried a cost. "Thank you," I said. She continued, voice syrupy and controlled. "I can only imagine how difficult it must be living on a fixed income after retirement. You've given so much of yourself all those years." The tone was tender, but beneath it I heard something else. Condescension disguised as care. "I manage fine," I replied. "Oh, I'm sure you do," she said quickly, lifting her hands in mock humility. "But still, it must be a comfort to know Daniel will always look after you. Families should help each other, don't you agree?" Her words hovered in the air like bait. Richard nodded, not looking at me. Olivia stirred her coffee, eyes lowered. Claudia leaned in slightly, lowering her voice just enough to sound intimate. "We've been thinking," she said, "it might be nice to ease some of your burdens. Just something small each month, so Daniel doesn't have to worry about you." The room went silent. Even the hum of conversation from nearby tables seemed to fade. I looked at her, at the perfect posture, the manicured hands resting on the linen, the face carved by privilege and the need to be admired. She smiled wider, misunderstanding my silence as gratitude. "Of course, you wouldn't have to mention it to anyone. Just a quiet arrangement between family." Slow motion. Her hand reached across the table, landing gently on mine. Warm, light, sweet as poison. For a heartbeat, I didn't move. The softness of her skin against mine felt rehearsed. Every gesture, every pause, part of a performance she had perfected. I glanced at Daniel, his jaw clenched, his eyes fixed on the tablecloth. He didn't look up, didn't stop her. That, more than her words, was what hurt. Olivia glanced up, guilt flickering across her face like candlelight in the wind. I inhaled slowly, keeping my voice soft. "That's generous of you," I said. Claudia's smile brightened, triumphant. She believed she had done something noble. I let the silence stretch. 1 second, 2, 3. Long enough for everyone at that table to feel the weight of it. Daniel's hand twitched on his lap. His shoulders sank. He couldn't meet my eyes. Richard cleared his throat. "It's settled then. We'll transfer something monthly, just as Claudia said. It's no trouble." Claudia nodded. "We insist. The family should help each other." Olivia's voice broke the rhythm. "Mom," she started, then stopped. Claudia gave her a sharp look. "It's decided." I smiled again, the same calm curve of lips that had disarmed hundreds of arrogant men in conference rooms. "You're very kind," I said quietly. "I'll think about it." Claudia's expression softened, pleased with herself. "Wonderful. I knew you'd understand." The waiter returned with the bill folder. Richard waved him off. "Already taken care of." The pen inside my purse pressed against my palm. I felt its weight like an anchor. As we stood to leave, Claudia adjusted her shawl and patted my arm. "We'll call next week to arrange everything. It'll be easier for Daniel that way." Easier. That word lingered. Outside, the wind had picked up again, carrying the smell of wet pavement and exhaust. I walked with them to the entrance. Daniel offered to call a car for me, but I shook my head. "I'll be fine," I said. He hesitated, then leaned close. "Mom, they mean well," he whispered. I looked at him. The boy who once swore he'd take care of me when he grew up. The man now terrified of my reflection among his new world. I wanted to tell him that good intentions are often the first disguise of cruelty, but I didn't. I only nodded. "Of course they do." Claudia and Richard stepped ahead, laughing softly about their weekend plans. Olivia lingered for a moment, her eyes wet but her lips closed. She wanted to speak, I could tell, but she didn't. As I watched them walk away, I felt the chill return, not from the air, but from what I had seen. The easy way money could turn affection into hierarchy, generosity into insult. I turned back toward the city lights, the golden glow from the restaurant windows reflecting off the puddles at my feet. Each reflection shimmered, fragile but clear. At that moment, I realized something. Their pity wasn't a wound, it was a mirror. It showed me exactly where I no longer belonged. The taxi I hailed took a while to arrive. I stood quietly, hands folded over my purse. The driver pulled up, rolling down the window. "Cold night, huh?" he said. "Yes," I replied, "but it's a clean kind of cold." As we drove away, I glanced once more at the restaurant's glittering facade shrinking in the distance. The city blurred past, neon, glass, rain. Somewhere behind me, Claudia was probably telling Richard what a kind thing they had done. Daniel would nod, grateful for their help. Olivia would sit in silence, thinking of the look on my face. I rested my hand over the pen again. It was cool to the touch. The memory of Claudia's hand lingered, soft, perfumed, performative. But the silver pen, heavy and real, reminded me who I was. By the time the taxi stopped in front of my house, the fog had lifted. The porch light glowed faintly, a single small star against the night. I paid the driver, stepped out, and stood for a moment, breathing in the quiet. The humiliation of that dinner had already begun to crystallize into something else. Clarity. I unlocked the door, stepped inside, and placed my purse on the table. The silver pen rolled out, landing neatly beside the note I had written earlier. You learn who people are by who they think you are. I picked it up and smiled. Indeed, I whispered. The waiter approached just as Claudia finished her final sip of wine. His posture was polite, but his eyes carried hesitation. He leaned slightly toward Richard and spoke in a low tone meant for discretion. "Excuse me, sir, your card didn't go through." For a heartbeat, no one moved. The clinking of cutlery from other tables filled the silence like background noise in a theater scene. Richard blinked, his hand frozen halfway between his glass and the table. "I'm sorry?" The waiter cleared his throat gently. "It seems the transaction didn't process. Perhaps you could try another card." Claudia's smile stiffened, that perfect social armor beginning to crack. "There must be a system error," she said quickly, her voice pitched slightly higher than before. "Richard, try the platinum one." Richard reached for his wallet with visible annoyance. Yes, of course. These things happen all the time." He handed over another card with a sharp gesture. The waiter nodded, disappearing toward the register. The conversation at the table died completely. Claudia took a long breath, straightening her posture. "Technology," she said, forcing a laugh. "Completely unreliable these days." Daniel tried to smile. "Yeah, happens all the time." But his voice faltered. I sat quietly, hands resting on my lap, watching the performance unfold. The light above our table reflected on the crystal glasses, on Claudia's trembling fingers as she reached for her napkin, on Richard's jaw tightening with every passing second. When the waiter returned, he was pale. "I'm terribly sorry, sir," he said softly. "This one didn't go through either." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the background music seemed to pause. Claudia's face flushed a shade deeper than the wine in her glass. Richard looked at the waiter with disbelief. "That's ridiculous. Try again." The waiter hesitated, then whispered, "We did. Twice." Claudia laughed again, too loud, too brittle. "Well, that's embarrassing," she said. "We'll sort it out. There must be a network issue." Her laugh dissolved into silence. Richard's hand moved toward his phone, perhaps to call the bank, but the tremor in his fingers betrayed the panic beneath the surface. Daniel's eyes darted between them, unsure whether to intervene. Olivia looked down at the table, her shoulders drawn in. That was the moment I decided to end the charade. I leaned forward slightly, my tone gentle. "Please, let me handle this." Claudia looked up sharply. "Oh, no, that's unnecessary, really." "I insist," I said. The words hung in the air, not loud, not sharp, but steady. I reached into my purse, pulling out my worn brown leather wallet. It was old, the corners softened from years of use. Claudia's eyes followed the movement with faint curiosity, perhaps expecting cash or a faded debit card. Instead, I took out a single matte black card, no logo, no design, just weight. The waiter's eyes widened slightly. He recognized what it was, even if no one else did. I placed it on the tray with quiet precision. "Here," I said, "try this one." Claudia blinked. "Oh, Patricia, that's very kind, but really—" I smiled. "It's no trouble." The waiter nodded respectfully and hurried away. No one spoke. Richard's jaw tightened further. Claudia forced another small laugh, the sound thin as glass. "How thoughtful of you," she murmured. "You didn't have to." I met her gaze calmly. "Of course I didn't." Daniel's shoulders sank as he exhaled, a quiet sound of relief mixed with shame. He stared at his hands. "Moms," he started, but I shook my head slightly, silencing him. The waiter returned within moments. "It's all set, ma'am. Thank you." He handed me the receipt to sen. I uncapped my pen, the silver one, and wrote my name with practiced ease. The waiter bowed slightly. "Have a wonderful evening." "Thank you," I said. Claudia tried to recover her composure. "Well, that's settled then," she said brightly, though her voice trembled. "What a silly situation. Imagine if the entire restaurant saw." Richard said nothing. His eyes avoided mine completely. I folded the receipt neatly and slipped it into my purse. The card disappeared back inside, as quietly as it had appeared. Claudia reached for her shawl, smiling again, but with visible effort. "We'll, of course, reimburse you, Patricia. It's the least we can do." "That won't be necessary," I replied. "Oh, but really, we insist," she said quickly, trying to reclaim control. I looked at her. "Then consider it a family gift," I said softly. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Daniel rubbed the back of his neck. Olivia finally looked up. "Thank you, Mrs. Lowe," she whispered, her tone sincere. "You're welcome, dear." We rose from the table. The waiter held the door for us. Claudia walked ahead, her heels clicking too fast, too sharp. Outside, the night air was cool, the street still wet from rain. The reflections of the restaurant lights rippled on the pavement like gold scattered over water. Claudia turned to me, still clinging to her smile. "You really didn't have to do that, Patricia. It must have been quite a sum." "It was," I said, "but I can afford it." The words were not prideful. They were simply true. Claudia hesitated, unsure whether to thank me or be offended. "Well, how lovely for you." Richard cleared his throat again. "I'll call the bank first thing tomorrow." "Of course," Claudia said. Daniel's voice was quiet. "Mom, you didn't have to—" I stopped him gently. "I know." The valet brought their car around. Claudia and Richard climbed in quickly, their eyes avoiding mine. Olivia lingered by the curb. "You handled that beautifully," she said softly. I smiled at her. "There's beauty in quiet lessons." She nodded, and for a fleeting moment, her eyes shone with something like respect. Then she followed her husband into the car. Daniel stayed behind. "Mom," he said again, his voice breaking, "I'm sorry about tonight. They can be difficult." I looked at him, at the face that once fit in my hands. "They were themselves, Daniel, that's all." He looked away, ashamed. "You didn't have to pay. I should have—" "Don't," I said gently. "You'll understand one day." He nodded faintly, not understanding at all. The car doors closed. The engine started. They drove off into the night, taillights blurring in the rain. I stood there alone for a moment, the air cool against my skin, the faint scent of truffle and wine still clinging to my coat. The silence after their departure felt heavier than the entire dinner. I walked toward the street corner to hail my own cab. The city was quieter now, the rain softening into mist. As I waited, a thought crossed my mind, clear and calm. They had spent the evening measuring my worth in assumptions, and I had let them. I smiled to myself. That was the lesson they would remember long after their embarrassment faded. When the taxi arrived, I stepped inside and looked out the window one last time. The restaurant glowed behind me, beautiful and distant. When their car pulled away, Daniel stayed behind. The night air was damp, filled with the faint hum of city traffic. He turned toward me, his hands buried in his pockets, the way he used to stand when he was a teenager caught between guilt and pride. "Mom," he said, hesitating, "can I ask you something?" "Of course." He glanced at the pavement, then back at me. "That card, the one you used, where did you get it?" His tone wasn't angry, it was confusing, like a boy trying to fit a new truth into an old story. I smiled faintly. "From work." He frowned. "Work? You're still working?" "Yes," I said. "I never stopped. I just stopped talking about it." He blinked, as if the idea didn't quite make sense. "I thought you retired years ago. You told me you wanted a quiet life." "I did," I said softly. "A quiet life, not an idle one." He looked at me, searching for something. Proof, maybe, or understanding. "So, what do you do?" "The same thing I've always done," I said. "I help schools stay alive." He opened his mouth, but I continued before he could ask more. When I left teaching, I started consulting. It began with one district that was about to close 2 of its schools. They needed someone to review their budget. I offered to help. As I spoke, my mind drifted backward, years folding over like pages in an old book. Flashback. The memory returned in detail. A boardroom, fluorescent lights buzzing above, papers scattered across a long oak table. A group of anxious administrators sat across from me, their faces tight with worry. "We can't keep the programs running," one of them said. "We'll lose half our teachers by next semester." I had looked at the numbers for hours, tracing every dollar like a heartbeat. "You're not losing teachers," I told them. "You're losing faith in your own math." They stared. I pointed to a column no one had noticed, an overlooked grant that could be renewed. A clause that freed funds from a suspended contract. "If we restructure here," I said, tapping the page, "you'll have enough to keep both schools open, but you'll need the courage to do it differently." The superintendent, a gray-haired man with tired eyes, leaned back in his chair. "If this works, you'll save 1,000 jobs," I smiled. "Then let's make it work." Weeks later, when the news came that the schools had been saved, one of the younger analysts had called me a legend. I laughed. Legends are just people who refuse to be underestimated. Back in the present, I watched Daniel's expression shift, from confusion to realization, then to something heavier. "You never told me," he said quietly. "There was no reason to," I replied. "You had your own life, your own worries. I didn't want to be another one." He shook his head slowly. "But you make that much money? 30,000 a month?" I looked at him, a mix of pride and sadness rising in my chest. "It isn't about the number, Daniel. It's about knowing my value after years of being told it was small." He swallowed hard. "I never meant to make you feel small." "I know," I said gently, "but you didn't have to. Say it for me to feel it. Sometimes silence carries the loudest message." He exhaled, the breath shaky. When you showed up tonight, I thought you might embarrass me. I didn't even realize I was ashamed of something that never needed hiding." "That's how shame works," I said. "It sneaks in quietly. You start measuring people by what they own instead of what they've endured." He nodded, eyes glistening in the glow of the streetlight. "You could have told me, Mom," I smiled. "And what would that have changed? Would you have treated me better, been prouder, or would you have just been relieved that your wife's parents would finally respect me?" He didn't answer. Daniel rubbed his eyes. "I'm sorry," he said finally, "for how they talked to you, for how I didn't stop them." I placed a hand on his arm. "It's all right. Sometimes you have to see who people are before you can see yourself." He looked at me with the same expression he'd had as a child when he'd broken something precious. Fear mixed with regret. "They offered you money," he said. "That was awful." I smiled softly. "It was predictable." He laughed weakly. "You handled it better than anyone I know." "That's because I've had practice." "Practice?" I nodded. Years of being underestimated is the best training for grace under fire. He let out a small breath that sounded almost like a laugh. "I don't deserve you." I tilted my head. "You don't need to. Just remember me accurately." He looked away. his jaw trembling. I will. For a while, we stood in silence, the city lights flickering around us. Cars passed. Voices echoed faintly from the restaurant. The night felt still, balanced between endings and beginnings. Then Daniel spoke again, softer this time. "You're incredible, Mom." I shook my head. "No, I'm ordinary. I just stopped pretending to be less." He nodded, absorbing every word. The taxi lights turned the wet pavement into rivers of gold. He looked at me as if seeing me for the first time, not as a mother or a burden, but as a woman who had carried the entire world without applause. "I wish Dad were here," he whispered. I smiled. "He is, in every decision I make." He nodded again, silent, and the guilt on his face began to melt into something else. Respect. The driver honked gently to signal the cab's arrival. I turned to Daniel. "Go home, take care of your wife, and think about what you saw tonight. Not what I paid, but what it cost to stay silent for so long." He swallowed. "I will." I touched his cheek briefly, the way I used to when he was small. "Good night, Daniel." He whispered, "Good night, Mom," and walked toward his car, his steps slower, heavier, but somehow steadier. As I watched him go, I felt no anger, no triumph, only clarity. The taxi driver opened the door for me. I slid inside, resting, my purse on my lap. The city glided past the window, familiar, indifferent, alive. I touched the silver pen again. Its cool metal felt grounding, a reminder of all the signatures that had shaped more than money, schools, futures, dignity. As the cab turned the corner, I looked once more toward the restaurant's fading lights. Behind those walls, they would talk, question, wonder. But I had no need to explain. The truth had already arrived, quietly, elegantly, and right on time. I was just about to step into the taxi when I heard her heels clicking sharply against the pavement. Claudia's voice followed, tight and trembling, the mask finally slipping. "Patricia, wait!" I turned. She was standing near the valet stand, wrapped in her shawl, the wind tugging at its edges. Her face, once perfectly composed, was now pale under the streetlights. She clutched her purse with both hands like it was proof of control she no longer had. "Claudia," I said softly, "you forgot something?" She took a few quick steps toward me, her tone low and sharp. "Yes, my dignity." I stayed still, letting the silence expand between us. Around us, cars came and went, doors opened, engines hummed. The world kept moving, but for that moment, we stood in a small, frozen circle of truth. She pulled out an envelope from her purse and thrust it toward me. "Here, this should cover what you paid, plus a little extra for the inconvenience." I didn't reach for it. "That won't be necessary." Her jaw tightened. "Take it, I insist." I met her eyes. "You're not repaying me. You're trying to erase tonight." Her nostrils flared. "You made me look foolish." I let her words settle, unhurried. "I didn't make you. You chose it." Her breath caught. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means," I said evenly, "I didn't say a single unkind thing to you tonight. Everything you felt was built from what you assumed." She stared at me, eyes darting between anger and disbelief. "You lied to us." I shook my head. "No, I just let you speak long enough to reveal yourselves." The silence that followed was heavier than shouting could ever be. I watched her expression flicker, the confusion of someone realizing they'd been holding a mirror the whole time and mistook it for a window. Her voice softened, almost pleading. "Why didn't you tell us who you were? About your job? About that card?" I tilted my head slightly. Would it have changed anything? Claudia hesitated. Her lips parted, but no words came out. The pause said everything. She finally managed a strained laugh. "You must think I'm horrible." "I think you're human," I said gently. "Just one who's forgotten what kindness sounds like when it doesn't come from her own reflection." Her hand trembled as she clutched the envelope. "You're very clever, Patricia." "Not clever," I said. "Just observant." She looked down, her voice quieter now. "Richard will be furious when he finds out." "Then let him be," I said. Sometimes anger is just embarrassment in disguise. Her head snapped up, eyes glistening. Do you have any idea how that felt? Sitting there while you... She stopped herself, realizing she had nothing to accuse me of. While I, what? I asked softly. Paid the bill you insisted was yours? Sat quietly while you lectured me about humility? She pressed her lips together. You humiliated me. No, I said, my voice calm but steady. You humiliated yourself. You measured worth by presentation, and when the numbers changed, your equation broke. Her eyes filled, but she refused to let the tears fall. You're cruel, she whispered. I smiled faintly. No, Claudia, cruelty requires intention. I only gave you silence, and you did the rest. She looked at the envelope still in her hand, her fingers loosened. The paper trembled slightly in the wind. I thought I was helping you, she murmured. I thought I was being kind. You were being generous on your own terms, I said. That's not kindness. That's control. The valet turned briefly toward us, pretending not to listen. Claudia noticed and quickly straightened, brushing invisible lint from her shawl. Her voice steadied, the performance returning in fragments. You think this makes you better than me? I took a step closer, closing the distance between us until I could see the faint shimmer of tears in her eyes. No, I said. It makes me freer than you. She blinked. What does that mean? It means I don't need anyone's approval to know my value. You do. Her lips parted, but again, there was no reply. The wind caught the edge of the envelope, tugging it from her fingers. It slipped from her hand and fluttered to the wet pavement between us. Neither of us bent to pick it up. Claudia's shoulders sank slightly. Her hands fell to her sides, empty now. She looked smaller, not in stature, but in certainty. You must hate me, she said finally. I don't, I said. I don't waste energy hating people who teach me lessons. She gave a small, humorless laugh. And what lesson did I teach you? That sometimes, I said, people who have everything are the most afraid of being seen without it. Her breath caught again. She looked away toward the row of parked cars. You're cruelly honest. I'm simply done pretending. The wind picked up, carrying the faint scent of rain. The envelope at our feet shifted again, soaked now at the corners. Claudia bent down slowly and picked it up, holding it between her fingers as if unsure what to do with it. She looked at me one last time. You really won't take it? I shook my head. Keep it. Maybe use it for something that costs more than money. Her eyes flickered. And what's that? Change, I said. She looked at me for a long moment, her jaw working as if holding back another sharp retort. But this time none came. She turned away, clutching the damp envelope to her chest, and walked toward her car without another word. I watched her go, her silhouette framed by the red glow of the taillights, her heels clicking slower now, each step uncertain. When her car pulled out of the lot, the night fell still again. I stood there a moment longer, feeling neither triumph nor sorrow, only release. I walked back to the taxi, the driver waiting patiently with the engine running. As I slid into the seat, I caught my reflection in the rear-view mirror. My face looked calm, illuminated by the soft city glow. The driver asked quietly, "Everything all right, ma'am?" I smiled. "Perfectly." As the taxi pulled away, I looked out the window, the light streaking past like threads of gold. Somewhere behind me, a woman named Claudia Avery was learning the difference between pride and dignity. 3 days later, the doorbell rang just after sunrise. I was warming oatmeal on low heat. The window cracked to let in the cool air. When I opened the door, Daniel stood there, eyes tired, face softer than I'd seen in years. Olivia was beside him, her hands clasped tightly at her coat, her expression unsure without her usual polish. "Mom," Daniel said quietly, "can we talk?" I stepped aside. The house smelled of cinnamon and coffee. They entered like people crossing a border, uncertain which customs still applied. We sat at the kitchen table, the morning light pouring across the wood in long, forgiving lines. Daniel went first. "I'm sorry," he said, "for that night, for not stopping them, for asking you to be small so I could feel big." His voice cracked. "You didn't deserve that." Olivia's eyes shimmered. "Mrs. Lowe," she said, "I owe you an apology too. My parents taught me fear, not kindness. If someone looked poor, we looked past them. If someone didn't speak like us, we raised our voices instead of our understanding. I thought that was how safety worked." Her voice broke. "Now I see it was cowardice." I folded my hands, watching her tremble. "Fear can be a teacher," I said softly. "It just gives cruel homework." Olivia let out a shaky laugh that turned into a sob. Daniel reached for her hand, then looked at me. "We confronted them," he said. "They called you manipulative. I told them you were patient. They said you embarrassed them. I told them they embarrassed themselves." I poured coffee for all three of us. The mugs steamed between us, small lanterns against the gray morning. Olivia wiped her face and took a breath. "Would you forgive them?" she asked. "If they apologize?" I looked out the window for a moment, watching light slide across the fence. "Forgiveness isn't approval," I said. "It's peace. It means I won't carry what they did anything farther than the doorstep of today." She repeated the word quietly. "Peace." Daniel's eyes wandered to the counter, where my silver pen lay beside the teapot. "Dad gave you that, didn't he?" "Yes," I said, "on the day I signed my first consulting contract." Olivia looked at it with curiosity. "I've never signed anything that scared me," she admitted. "Every paper in my life came ready, like my name was just decoration." I stood and brought the pen to the table, setting it between us like a compass. "This belonged to a man who believed in beginnings," I said. "He used to tell me ink dries faster when you're brave." Olivia smiled faintly through red eyes. "I want to be brave," she whispered, "but I don't know where to start." "Start in the smallest room," I said. "The room inside your chest where excuses echo. Close the door. Write one honest sentence." Her brows furrowed. "What sentence?" "I was taught fear," I said. "I choose kindness." Her breath trembled out as if releasing something old. Daniel squeezed her hand. The air around us softened. Olivia straightened a little. "We've decided to set boundaries," she said. "We told my parents they can't buy our choices anymore. If they try, we'll step back. We choose us." I smiled. "That's a contract worth signing." Daniel exhaled, his shoulders relaxing. "We also want you at our home on Sundays. No pretense, no performances, just dinner and jazz on the old turntable." "My favorite kind of night," I said. He smiled for the first time in days. "We know." We ate oatmeal from mismatched bowls. I added brown sugar to Olivia's the way I used to for Daniel after soccer practice. She thanked me as if sweetness were something new. Outside, birds tested their voices. The city yawned awake. When the dishes were done, Daniel took out the trash. Olivia stayed, turning her mug in her hands. "May I ask you something personal?" she said. "Of course." "How did you learn to walk away without slamming doors?" I smiled. "Practice. And a rule. If a room asks me to leave my dignity at the door, I leave the room instead." She nodded slowly. "My mother would call that pride." "It's hygiene," I said, "like washing your hands after touching something toxic." Her laugh was small but honest. She reached toward the silver pen, then hesitated. "May I?" I nodded. "Try the weight." She picked it up, her fingers curling around it carefully. "It's heavier than it looks." "Responsibility often is," I said. Daniel returned, closing the door softly behind him. "We should go," he said. "We're meeting the contractor about the nursery." He flushed. "We weren't ready to tell anyone yet." Joy rose in me like sunlight on the sink. "Then let me be the first to bless the crib," I said. "May your child learn 2 truths early. Love is a verb. Kindness is a decision." Olivia pressed the pen against her palm as if sealing something invisible. "I want our child to meet the woman you were last week," she said, "and know that dignity can be quiet." I reached across the table and placed my hand over hers. "Then write your own way." I closed her fingers gently around the pen. "Let this be your first tool, not your last resort." Daniel's voice cracked. "Mom, thank you for waiting for me to grow up." "I wasn't waiting," I said. "I was walking. You just caught up." He smiled. I'm trying. Trying, I said. Is a door already half open? They stood to leave. Coats, keys, quiet gratitude. At the door, Olivia paused. If my parents come to apologize, will you meet them? I'll meet the truth wherever it stands, I said, but I won't stand where it refuses to arrive. She nodded slowly. Fair. Daniel kissed my cheek. See you Sunday. I watched them walk down the stairs together, their steps soft and steady. The sound faded into the hum of morning traffic. When the house grew still again, I looked at the counter where the pen had rested. The space felt lighter now, like something had finally found its rightful home. I washed the cups, wiped the table, and opened the window wider. The day smelled like rain, trying to decide if it should come back. I sat with my notebook and wrote 3 things. Call Helen, send the grant proposal, and buy lemons for Sunday chicken. Ordinary things. Glorious things. Then the bell rang again. A delivery waited on the mat, a small bouquet of wildflowers wrapped in brown paper, and a note in Olivia's careful handwriting. 2 words only, choosing kindness. I placed the bouquet in a jar where the silver pen used to be. The space looked right. Some tools you keep, some you pass on. Peace is knowing which is which. Helen chose the corner table by the window, the one that caught the morning light like a blessing. When I walked in, she lifted her cup in greeting. Steam rose between us like a curtain opening. She searched my face, then smiled in that way only old friends do, half welcome and half relief. You always had a gift for knowing when silence speaks louder, she said as I slid into the chair across from her. I had practice, I answered. Silence is the only language some people are willing to hear. She reached for my hand and gave it a careful squeeze. I heard about the dinner. Not from you, of course. From the grapevine that never sleeps. I was going to call today, I said. Daniel came by with Olivia. We cleaned the air until it tasted like rain. Helen laughed softly. That's you, weathering storms and setting forecasts. She glanced at the barista. 2 refills, please. Then she turned back to me. Tell me how you're really doing. I'm steady, I said. The ground feels honest again. Her eyes moved to the flowers in the small vase between us. Wildflowers, she said. Hope that wanders. From Olivia, I replied, a note that said, choosing kindness. Helen let the words sit. Beautiful, she murmured. You gave her something to carry. I gave her a pen, I said. It used to be mine. Helen's mouth curved. Of course you did. You're forever passing keys instead of closing doors. I watched a couple at the counter decide between croissants and restraint. The cafe hummed with small decisions, the kind that shape days and sometimes lives. Claudia followed me to the curb, I said. She tried to return the money. She tried to erase the moment, Helen corrected gently. She said I made her look foolish. And what did you say? I told her she chose it. Helen sat back, eyes warm, then proud. Pat, you always did know the difference between mercy and permission. I thought of Claudia's trembling hands, the envelope wilting in the wind. I felt no triumph, I said. Just clarity, like a bell rang once, clean and final. Helen stirred her coffee, then let the spoon go silent. My ex used to do that thing, she said, tilting her head. Praise with one hand, take with the other. You're so grounded, he'd say. Then call me small when I refused to decorate his ego. I nodded. Quiet control. The kind that never stains a shirt but ruins the person wearing it. She smiled without joy. After the divorce, I blamed myself for not shouting sooner. You did something braver, I said. You left without becoming him. Her eyes shone. We teach by example, even when no one's watching. We always have, I said. Students, neighbors, sons, daughters-in-law. People learn the shape of love by how we hold our own edges. The barista set fresh cups down with a soft clink. Sunlight slid higher across the table, warming the wood in our knuckles. Helen inhaled the cinnamon air and then lifted her gaze. Did Daniel understand? He's arriving, I said. He thought shame kept him safe. He mistook the apology for obedience. Now he's learning boundaries and care can hold hands. And Olivia? She's brave in small ways already. That is how revolutions begin in decent families." Helen laughed. "Write that down." "I told her to do it," I said. "With the pen." She tilted her head toward the door, where a woman in scrubs held it open for an older man with a cane. "Kindness without witnesses," Helen whispered, "the only kind that sticks." We sat for a moment, letting the world move around us. Traffic sighed beyond the glass. Spoons chimed against porcelain. Somewhere a phone vibrated, patient and insistent. The cafe's bulletin board held flyers for piano lessons, grief groups, and a farmer's market that promised peaches thick with sunlight. I felt the ordinary holiness of a Tuesday morning. Helen leaned in. "Tell me the part you have not said." I drew a breath. When the waiter whispered that Richard's card had failed, I saw Claudia reach for dignity and grab a performance instead. I recognized the reach. I have done it myself, just never at someone else's expense. "You paid," Helen said simply. "I eased the room," I said. Then I stepped out of it. Helen's smile was small and proud. "You didn't lose anything that night, Pat. You reminded everyone what class really means." I let the sentence enter and settle. "Class is clean hands," I said, "and a door held open even as you leave." She half laughed, half sighed. "I used to think class meant refusing to cry. Now I know it means refusing to lie." I sipped my coffee. "Truth with manners," I said. "Pointed, not sharp." Helen's eyes softened. "Your husband would have loved the way you carried it." "He was there," I said, "in the feel of the pen, in the way I waited my turn." We watched the light slide past noon on the opposite wall. I told her about the boundaries Daniel and Olivia had set, about Sunday dinners and old jazz, about the nursery appointment and the way Daniel's voice bent when he said the word crib. Helen listened like someone receiving precious cargo. "They'll come through it," she said. "The young do, when they find the right elders." "We take the sharp things out of the road," I said. "Then we leave the road to them." She nodded. "And they learn to carry a broom." We laughed. The easy kind that stretches the lungs back to their natural size. A college kid near the window smiled at us as if our joy were contagious. I hoped it was. "Will Claudia apologize?" Helen asked. "If she does," I said, "I'll see the truth where it stands. I won't walk to where it refuses to arrive." Helen drummed her fingers once, satisfied. "You could teach a master class on dignified refusal." "I already did," I said. "One audience, 4 seats, very expensive decor." She covered my hand again. "Tell me the line you carried home." I looked at the doorway, where customers drifted in with their weather and left with something warmer. "Forgiveness is not approval. It's peace," I said. "I won't decorate the past. I will clear the path." Helen breathed out, long and even. "You always did turn thresholds into classrooms." "Maybe thresholds are where we earn our education," I said. "A foot in what hurt, a foot in what heals." The barista wiped the counter. A bus exhaled at the corner. Somewhere a siren wailed and faded, like a warning changing its mind. I felt the delicate weight of the present, not heavy, not light, but exact. Helen glanced toward my empty purse pocket. "Do you miss the pen?" "No," I said. "It was never meant to retire on my counter. It belongs to the next honest sentence." She smiled. "You're good at endings." "I'm getting better at the beginning," I said, "the kind that does not need applause." We stood to leave. Chairs scraped softly, coats found shoulders, coins chimed in a tip jar like small approvals. Outside, the day had brightened into a promise. Helen looped her arm through mine. "Walk a block?" "A block," I agreed. We stepped into the light. The door closed behind us with a gentle thud, sealing the warmth inside and releasing another kind into the street. As we passed the bakery, a woman held a croissant and a briefcase in the same hand and smiled at a stranger for no reason. Helen nodded toward her. "There," she said. "Proof." "Of what?" I asked. "That kindness does not need an audience," she said. "It only needs a hallway." We reached the corner and paused. Helen kissed my cheek. "Go home, Pat. Write your weather. Hang your wildflowers where the sun can find them." "I will," I said. And when Sunday comes, I'll set an extra plate. For whom? For whoever finally chooses to eat without a throne, I said. Helen laughed, bright and clean. There she is, she whispered, my friend who turns peace into verbs. We parted there. I crossed the street with the light, carrying nothing except the shape of what mattered. The sky was still pale when I stepped outside the next morning. The neighborhood had not fully woken. Mailboxes yawned with yesterday's envelopes, and sprinklers murmured their routine prayers across small front lawns. I slipped my hands into my coat pockets and began walking, letting the cool air fill my lungs. The street smelled faintly of damp earth. Birds hopped along the curb, pecking at leftover crumbs from someone's hurried breakfast. A boy on a bicycle whizzed past me, the tassels on his handlebars fluttering like small flags. I smiled, remembering Daniel at that age, knees always bruised, dreams always unfiltered. No one had taught him shame then. I walked past the bakery, where warm bread perfumed the sidewalk, and turned toward the small park. Dew still clung to the swing chains, beating light like tiny diamonds. I sat on the wooden bench near the pond, the one where my husband used to tell me that the world bends toward those who refuse to bow. My phone buzzed, a soft vibration in my pocket. A new email from Olivia. I opened it. Patricia, I wanted you to know I called my parents. I told them I don't want their money anymore. Not for the apartment, not for our future child, not for anything. Daniel and I are going to build our life from effort, not approval. Thank you for giving me a model of dignity that whispers instead of shouts. I hope one day I can offer our child what you offered me, permission to become something different than what I was taught. Love, Olivia attached, was a photo. She was holding the silver pen, resting gently across an open blank page. A sentence written in her handwriting. Choosing kindness is choosing freedom. I closed my eyes, letting the moment land. When I returned home later that afternoon, the mailbox held a small envelope addressed in Daniel's handwriting. Inside was a handwritten note and a Polaroid of the tiny apartment he and Olivia had just moved into. The photo showed mismatched chairs, a secondhand table, and a single plant leaning toward the light. On the note, he had written, "Dinner, Sunday. No reservations needed. We're cooking." At the bottom, he added a postscript. "We don't want the life they tried to buy. We want the life we choose." My chest warmed, not just with pride, but with relief. He had unlearned something, and sometimes unlearning takes more courage than learning ever will. Sunday came faster than I expected. I walked the 3 blocks to their new apartment, bringing nothing but a lemon pie and my unhurried heart. Daniel opened the door before I could knock. "Mom," he said, his voice steady, warm, unperformed. He hugged me with the sincerity of a boy who had finally stopped performing adulthood long enough to be real. Inside, Olivia stood at the stove, stirring a pot of tomato sauce. She wore an apron dusted with flour and smiled at me with a softness that needed no explanation. "I hope you're hungry," she said. "It turns out recipes don't read themselves." I smiled back. "They only require patience." "We're learning that," Daniel said, kissing her cheek. The apartment was small, 2 rooms, 1 wobbly table, and a window that opened to the fire escape. But nothing felt missing. I set the lemon pie on the table. Daniel poured iced tea. Olivia lit a candle. We ate slowly, laughing over undercooked garlic bread and spilled sauce. Every sound felt like stitching, a family mending thread by thread. Their plates were mismatched, but the gratitude on them was whole. After dinner, Daniel cleared the dishes while Olivia wiped the counter. I walked to the bookshelf, a simple plank of wood supported by 2 bricks. On the top shelf, next to a jar of loose change and a stack of cookbooks, sat the silver pen. She had placed it upright inside a small ceramic cup, as if giving it a place of honor. It was not on display as a trophy. It was waiting as a tool. "Olivia," I said gently, "do you mind?" She turned, drying her hands on a towel. "Not at all." I picked up the pen, feeling its familiar weight. I walked to the small dining table. The candle flickered, casting shadows that looked like soft brushstrokes along the wall. Slowly, ceremonially, I set the silver pen down on the center of the table. The circle closed. No applause, no speech, no grand reveal. Just presence, just peace. Olivia understood instantly. She covered my hand with hers. "Thank you," she whispered, "for not correcting me when I was small, for waiting until I wanted to grow." Daniel placed his hand on top of ours. "For forgiving us," he said. "Forgiveness isn't approval," I whispered. "It's the decision to stop carrying what was never mine to hold." We stayed like that, 3 hands over a pen that had carried decades, decisions, and the weight of unspoken truth. Later, when it was time to leave, they walked me to the door. Olivia hugged me first, tight, real. Then Daniel kissed the top of my head. "See you next Sunday?" "Every Sunday," I said. Outside, the evening air was cool, threaded with the smell of rain waiting beyond the horizon. I walked home slowly, letting each step register the newness of everything. Back at home, I placed the lemon pie plate in the sink and washed it without hurry. I dried it, set it in the cabinet, and turned off the kitchen light. My house was quiet, but I was not alone. The silence was no longer empty. It was earned. The night had a soft hum to it, the kind that only comes when the world decides to rest. I stood in my kitchen, barefoot on the cool tiles, the kettle beginning its gentle song. Steam curled like memory, slow, deliberate, impossible to hold. The clock ticked past 11. Outside, the streetlights painted the empty road in strokes of amber and silence. My reflection in the window looked older, yes, but also lighter. There was space now, where once there had been tension. I reached for the tin of chamomile tea, the same one my husband used to tease me about. "You drink peace like medicine," he'd say. Maybe he was right. Maybe peace has to be practiced until it becomes instinct. The kettle clicked. Ready. I poured the hot water over the dried petals and watched them bloom. The scent rose up. Clean, honeyed, familiar. I carried the cup to the table and sat down, letting the warmth seep into my palms. The kitchen was dim except for the soft light above the stove, the kind of light that forgives wrinkles and forgets time. On the counter sat a stack of letters, Olivia's note, Daniel's photo, and a few unopened bills that no longer frightened me. I smiled at the small jar of wildflowers that had started to dry at the edges. Even fading, they were beautiful in their persistence. I thought back to that dinner, the flash of crystal, the weight of unsaid words, the sting of polite cruelty. Once I might have replayed it in my head for weeks, wondering if I should have spoken louder, sharper, prouder. But now I saw it for what it was, a test of balance, a mirror showing me how still I could remain while the world trembled around me. Silence, I realized, isn't absence, it's authorship. The sound of a passing car drifted through the open window, followed by the soft rustle of wind through the trees. Somewhere, a neighbor's dog barked once, then gave up. Life continued, unconcerned, untheatrical, steady. I took a sip of tea. It was perfect. There was a time when I thought survival meant proving worth, earning validation like a paycheck, defending every inch of decency I possessed. But as the years folded in on themselves, I learned something simpler. Worth doesn't shout. It stands, quietly, until someone mistakes it for weakness, and then it proves otherwise. I looked again at the silver pen on the counter, catching the faint glint of moonlight. It had completed its circle, from a symbol of work to a lesson of legacy, from writing contracts to rewriting boundaries. I thought of Claudia and Richard. Maybe one day they would understand, maybe not. I didn't need the ending to be neat. Healing doesn't always sign its name. It just stops the bleeding. My phone buzzed with a late message from Daniel. "We made too much soup. Want to come by tomorrow?" I smiled. The sentence was small but heavy with meaning. No performance, no apology, just inclusion. That was enough. I typed back, "Save me a bowl." Then I set the phone down and returned to my tea. The steam had softened now, rising in smaller ribbons. I traced my finger along the edge of the cup. The rhythm of the moment, kettle, breath, night, felt like a kind of prayer. I stood and walked to the window. The moon hung low, half shadowed, half glowing. The world outside was imperfect but honest, just like the people in it. The teapot on the stove gave a small, final sigh, as if reminding me that even warmth has its own ending. I smiled and whispered, "Thank you." Not to anyone in particular, just to the quiet itself. For a long moment, I let myself simply exist there, between what had been and what was next. I turned off the stove light and sat back down, one last sip left in the cup. The tea had gone lukewarm, but I didn't mind. If anyone were to walk in right then, they would see a woman alone. But inside, I felt surrounded by lessons, by laughter, by forgiveness that had finally unclenched its fists. The world outside shifted toward dawn. A faint streak of light crept along the horizon. The air smelled of new beginnings, the kind that don't ask permission. The kettle clicked again as the metal cooled. I placed my hand over the teacup, absorbing what little heat remained. The house was still, and I could almost hear the future approaching softly, like footsteps on carpet. Before turning in, I wrote one last sentence on a notepad beside the window. It wasn't for publication or memory, it was for clarity. Peace doesn't announce itself. It arrives when you stop rehearsing pain. I tore the page out, folded it once, and slipped it under the base of the teacup. A promise to myself. The kettle gave one quiet pop as it cooled, and the faintest blush of dawn colored the glass. Fade out with the soft whistle of tea. The day was waiting.